clump of pine needles over here on the right hand side. You can see a couple leaves here in the middle. I am on the north side of the garage. It is Saturday, October 15th, 2022. I'm going to take a quick look at the gutter guards, see how they're performing at this point in the test. What we are seeing now is kind of peak fall. So we're seeing more and more of the leaves falling down. You can see behind me some of the pine needles. So while pine needles fall 24/7, 365 days a year, they also have a peak season, and October is that. So we're kind of right in the middle of that peak season. And I will show you here in a second what's going on. So stay tuned. I'm on the north side of the garage. We're looking at the MasterShield system. This is part of our long-term test. This MasterShield product has been up here since March of 2020. So about a little over 2.5 years at this point. You can see the pine needles that are up on the roof, the pine tree that's up above the garage, and those needles are falling down in a greater quantity than they have been throughout the course of the year. So you can see a little bit of activity here on the left-hand side, just some stuff loosely sitting up there. We've had some rain over the last 2 or 3 days, so things have, it was super dry for a while. Things have moistened up a little bit, and nothing is like clinging to the gutter guard, but you can just kind of see how it's, whatever's up there now is sitting up there, and that will easily blow off. But you can see the system is pretty free and clear. We've always had a little bit of an issue with stuff sitting at the left side of this, but it's nothing material. It's just up there temporarily, and that stuff will shift off as it has over the course of this long-term test with the MasterShield system. Here we're looking at LeafFilter on the north side of the garage. You can see there's a lot of stuff sitting on top of it. We've got a combination of seed pods, leaves, and pine needles. This system has pretty much always had something sitting on top of it. I would say since we're kind of in the peak of the fall season, although, you know, the trees above me they're still green. A lot of the maple trees are yellow and starting to lose their leaves, but the ones that are kind of on the back side of the property here are still green. This red bud tree there, you can see those leaves are starting to turn. So we're definitely getting some leaves falling off the trees, but maybe it isn't at the peak here at the garage. However, the pine needles you can see are down here in abundance. So at this point, all this stuff's just loosely sitting on top of the gutter guard. The question is, how long will it stay on top of the leaf filter system here on the north side of the garage? This is Klean Gutter on the north side of the garage. So you can see some pine needles, some small leaves off the locust tree, a little bit of bark, just some randomness up here on this panel. Again, nothing is clinging to the screen. That screen is fine enough that those pine needles would not be able to stick into the screen. So it's on the finer edge of the screen technology. What we're finding is more and more of these screens are getting more porous, and as a result, it can allow some pine needles to get through. But here, that screen is too fine to allow the pine needles to get through. So at this point, you just see a bunch of stuff sitting up on top of this system. And because it is at a nice slope with the roof, I suspect that most of it will just blow off without too much effort. I wanted to take a moment to introduce myself. I appreciate you for watching this video so far. I hope you find it informational. And before I get you back to the programming, I just wanted to take a moment. I'm Jonathan with Gutter Guards Direct. We've been helping homeowners solve their gutter and water problems since 1996. I started this video series in 2020 as a way to help homeowners better discern what gutter protection systems really work. There's obviously a lot of hype in the market. There's a lot of products on the market, way more products today than there ever were in the past, and I've always thought there were way too many gutter protection systems on the market. So this series is really my effort to help myself understand what are the best systems on the market, but by turning it into the Ultimate Gutter Guard Challenge on YouTube, it also helps you figure out what are the best systems for your particular environment. And again, I hope you're enjoying this video. Before I send you back to the programming, I wanted to take a moment and let you know that we also install gutters and gutter guards. And the guttering portion of it is generally in conjunction with installing the gutter guards. So we're not necessarily chasing gutter installation work by itself, but we will do it again if we are installing gutter guards on your home. And we service all of Ohio. We service southeast Michigan, so greater Detroit and Ann Arbor areas. We do greater Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania to the east. To the west, we go as far as greater Indianapolis and points a little bit north of Indianapolis, and pretty much south of there down to the Cincinnati and kind of Louisville, Kentucky areas. So anywhere kind of along the Ohio and northern Kentucky border. We service Louisville and Lexington, Kentucky, and then really any point in between those markets from Ohio all the way down to Tennessee, where we service greater Nashville, greater Knoxville, and occasionally we'll even visit Chattanooga. So if you live in any of these markets and you are interested in a free assessment at your home and a free estimate, feel free to give us a call at 1-800-750-2131. Again, that's 1-800-750-2131 for your free in-home estimate. Thanks, and back to the programming. This is Valor on the north side of the garage. So we have two installations of Valor on the north side of the garage. It installs within the gutter, which is the way that we received the product, or the intention behind the product was to install within the gutter. And you can see it has a bunch of stuff sitting on top of it. So like LeafFilter, the flatter it sits in the gutter, the more likely it is to be a shelf and stuff will sit on top of it. Now this screen, unlike the LeafFilter system, which has a super fine screen, this has a more porous screen. So if you look there, you might be able to see the porosity. I mean, you can literally see through the screen into the gutter below. So because of that, it's much more likely that these pine needles, when they come down, some of them will land vertically, so they'll kind of plug into the gutter or into the screen, and some of them will land horizontally and just lay on top of the screen. It's hard to tell right now what is what because there's so much stuff sitting on top of it. So it'll be interesting when we go to the south side of the garage to see what the version of Valor is that's sitting up under the shingles, if it's doing a better job deflecting the leaves and debris. This is GutterDome on the north side of the garage. So you can see that this has some of the pine needles, a few of the leaves from the locust tree, and just some random stuff, a little piece of bark there, some larger leaves sitting on top of it. This screen, by and large, is going to keep the pine needles out, I believe. In fact, while I normally don't touch anything, let me just grab that just to kind of verify what I'm thinking. So it could, if it landed just right, just the tip of the needle could get stuck inside that screen. But you know, the odds of that happening, well, maybe the odds of that happening are decent, but I don't think it's going to have any real material impact on it. But I don't want to prejudge this. So currently what we're seeing is just the pine needles laying horizontally across the screen, so there's nothing sticking to it that I can, oh, well, that's not entirely true. There you go. Prove me wrong. There's a little pine needle right there that's sticking into the screen, and then what happens is you get the needles and the leaves that come up from behind that. They can get stuck up on the screen as a result of something blocking their ability to move forward. So there's a case in point, an actual case in point, where it did land vertically. Most of it's horizontal, but clearly if it lands vertically, it can be an obstacle to allow stuff to get stuck behind it. Then the question is, how long will it take for this vertical one where it's plugged into the screen to break away. And is it something that you would have to come up and address at some point during the year? Here we're looking at Armour guard on the north side of the garage. You can see a clump of pine needles over here on the right hand side. You can see a couple leaves here in the middle, and then as we go to the left you see a few more pine needles. Overall, this is doing a nice job. I think what's sitting up here by and large won't stay up here very long, so that's good for the product. I will say I did stop up here yesterday and I noticed that there was a pine needle that was wedged vertically. It was just a single pine needle wedged vertically into the screen, and so it was essentially holding up the material that you see on the right hand side. I think what has happened since then is more material has worked its way off the roof and it's overwhelmed that one pine needle that was sticking straight up vertically into the screen, and now it's kind of barreled it over. So I suspect as the winds pick up or the rain comes by or whatever happens, that stuff should shift off the top, but it's too early to say at this point. So we'll just keep an eye on it and see what it looks like next time we come up. This is the solid gutter cover on the south side of the garage. You can see here that there's really nothing of any significance sitting on top of it. You got a few pine needles that are just passing over the top. There's a small stick down there at the right hand side of it. The solid gutter covers have always done a very effective job keeping leaves and debris off the surface because it is either bare metal or, in this case, a plastic. So there's no significant friction to hold anything up there or any obstacles to hold anything up there. So it does a very effective job on top of the gutter guard. However, its downfall is the slot across the front, and that has been consistently true of each of the 3 systems that we've tested over the past 3 years. So here you can see on the left hand side a bunch of small leaves and a couple pine needles and stuff that's just kind of sitting in that slot there. So it's not entirely closing up the slot into the gutter, but it's certainly blocking it to some extent. So it's going to affect the amount of water that can flow into the gutter at any given time. And this plastic system, unlike some of the metal systems, some of the professionally installed systems, because it has a lip across the front, this lip is what supports it on the front end. Some of the other systems, like a gutter helmet, they just are the helmet itself and there's no lip there. So there's nothing blocking the entrance into the gutter. But this and another system called Leaf Free that we've tested in the past, those definitely have tabs, essentially connectors between the front lip piece and then the main part of the gutter guard. There's a tab inside there of varying width. So on the Leaf Free system, it might be an inch wide or so. On this system, it's quite a bit wider. So it's going to act as more of a blockage opportunity as the leaves and debris come down. So if you just kind of look at the front of that going across, you'll see in part where it's dark there, that is leaves and debris that have kind of wedged in the front of that system. Here we're looking at RainDrop on the south side of the garage. This has been a very interesting system to look at over the course of time. The big issue that we have here on the garage is the locust flowers in the spring, the small locust leaves that come off mostly in the fall, but do drop at various times throughout the course of the year, and then obviously the pine needles. So the way this system is designed, it's a series of vertical ribs with a series of horizontal ribs. That's what holds the vertical ribs in place, the horizontal ribs do. It's made out of, they claim, the same material as a car bumper. And you can see what's happening with the pine needles. So here's a pine needle that's laying kind of flat vertically in line with the channels. You can kind of see that across. You can see instances where the pine needles right here are kind of wedged into they're dropping through those holes into the gutter area. So if you come back over here, here's another instance where the pine needles have actually dropped well into it. So at some point, because these are held together, those pine needles come down in clumps of 3 or 4, and they're held together with a little connector in the middle. As this stuff browns up and brittles up, then it will drop into the gutter. So the question is, how much stuff is inside the gutter? You can definitely see some leaves down there. You can see the green leaves that have kind of passed through. While we have maple trees here, there's some maple trees over the back of the garage there. We don't get a huge number of the helicopters off, and what I've heard from folks who have installed this system, if they have helicopters and they have hundreds or thousands of helicopters sticking up from inside through those slots, we haven't really seen that at this point yet. It's done a pretty effective job, it appears, keeping stuff off the top, but now we're kind of in the real test here to see how this thing will do throughout the course of the fall and into the winter. This is the open gutter on the south side of the garage. So this is the only section of gutter that we don't have a gutter guard sitting on top of. And this has been collecting leaves and debris and pine needles and sticks and twigs and everything throughout the course of the year. So while it doesn't look like there's a ton of stuff sitting inside there, it's in large part because that material has decayed over the course of the year. Every time it rains, we tend to get a buildup of water inside this. Right now, obviously, it's dry. You can see a big stem of the locust leaves just came off in one clump and fell inside the gutter. You can see some twigs down here that I think could be off the pine tree. And you see a whole bunch of other stuff that's collecting. So I fully expect by the time all the leaves have fallen that the interior of this gutter will be completely full or mostly full. So that's how it looks in the middle of October 2022 on the south side of the garage. This is HydroFlo right on the south side of the garage. As I've mentioned before, this one was developed, we heard, as a category killer, as the leaf filter category killer. Primary difference being it's made out of an aluminum framework instead of a plastic framework like leaf filter is. It is designed to install within the gutter, so you can see it's attached here on the front, and it's attached on the rear underneath that drip edge. So it sits flatter inside of the gutter. It does have a little bit of a built-in slope to it. Well, it's not a built-in slope, it's a slope determined by the installer. So I put it up at as much of a slope as we could based on what we had in front of us with the situation of the gutter and the drip edge and the roof line, but you can see the material that is sitting on top of it. So we have a fair number of locust leaves, we've got a bunch of pine needles, we've got some the darker stuff that you see there is actually the flowers from the locust tree in the fall, in the spring. So that stuff has been up there since like mid-May. We're now in mid-October, so for many months that material has been sitting on top of this screen. It has kind of decayed and dried up, and it's certainly possible that it might blow off between now and the time that this test ends next year. But you can see what's sitting up here at the moment, and this screen is also relatively porous. So this is similar to the Valor screen and maybe the another one that we did in the past by Homecraft. And what happens is the pine needles can just kind of lodge inside that screen. Now, the primary difference between this and the RainDrop system that I showed you a minute ago is that there is a framework behind this. So it's probably less likely that the pine needles are going to literally pass through into the gutter because of that framework is going to get in the way. But it'll be interesting to see what happens when we take this off, to see how much stuff did pass through. But I would say mostly because it's sitting relatively flat inside the gutter is the reason why you're seeing all the debris sitting on top of it currently. This is the upside down cheese grater on the south side of the garage. You can see a bunch of pine needles, some of the locust leaves, and other leaves sitting on top of it, maybe a few seed pods. Last time I was up here, I think we had this leaf here, and we had a seed pod that was sticking, wedged inside that. I don't know if it broke off and part of it went inside the garage, or excuse me, part of it went inside the gutter, or if it all went inside the gutter. But at the moment, you can see how things are kind of getting caught up here. So, well, some of this stuff is sitting flat on top of the gutter screen. You can also see instances where it's actually gotten inside those louvers, those slots, and it's stuck in there. So you definitely have material sitting on top of this one at this point in the test. What to me will be the most interesting thing is, what does it look like when we take it off next year? Is there going to be a lot of that stuff that passed through, or did it do a pretty effective job keeping the leaves and debris out of the gutter? This is Valor on the south side of the garage. We're testing this both on the north and the south sides of the garage. The difference is, on the north side, it sits within the gutter. On the south side, it's up underneath the first course of shingles. So you can see it's up there at a nice angle, good steep pitch to it. And you can see what is happening with the leaves and debris. So the closest equivalent to this, I think, well, actually there's several equivalents. Most of any of the gutter guards, any of the micro mesh systems that install under the first course of shingles are going to be very similar in terms of their ability to shed leaves and debris. So if you look at the things that are on the north side in the video, you'll see several systems: the Armour guard, the GutterDome, MasterShield, and then the Klean Gutter system all over there. All micro mesh systems with different screen porosity that you'll kind of see what stuff looks like. So this has the most porous screen of any of the micro mesh. So technically I wouldn't even call this a micro mesh system, because the screen is not all that micro, or at least not in the traditional sense of it. And you can see everything that's sitting on top of here. So it's actually kind of worse here to the middle and to the right than it is off to the left. But what we're seeing for sure is a lot of those pine needles are actually wedged inside the screen there. And what happens is, when it wedges in there, so when it's in there vertically, it allows the stuff that comes down behind it to get stuck there. And we have quite a clump of activity right here. So you've got this vertical number of needles there. You've got vertical here. You've got vertical next to that. There may be some other instances, but collectively, that's enough stuff to hold those pine needles behind it, to keep them from shifting off the top. So this is one of the interesting products in terms of it's a relatively popular product. I'm seeing a lot of people selling this product. They're not necessarily calling it Valor. I think in a lot of cases they are calling it Valor, but in other cases they've changed the name. And so we're seeing in the same market, oftentimes there's 2 or 3 providers that are essentially pushing the same product, which is a little bit unusual. Historically, we really haven't seen much overlap from different vendors, but it is definitely happening now. If you like this video, go ahead and hit the like and subscribe buttons and ding the bell, and you'll be notified the next time we upload a video. This is a completely different type of system than any of the other gutter covers we've ever tested.